Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some Meat Eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls because I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like him. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.
Hey, this is Tyler Jones, and you're listening to the Element Podcast. What's happening, all woods people? We are actually in between hunts right now. We got a cold front, didn't we, Casey?
We did, and it was actually quite chilly this morning. I was very cold, actually later in the morning, too. It's like the wind picked up, and that really put that chill in there. But it actually got some deer on their feet this morning, which was nice to see, man.
Yeah. Dude, I listen to a lot of things that you say. I take your knowledge and just what you have to say with a lot of respect.
Well, thanks, man. I don't know if that's well-grounded, but hey.
The one thing I don't listen to you on is layering.
Yeah?
Yeah, because I asked you this morning, I was like, it wasn't really a suggestion, but it was kind of like, I was kind of, I guess, suggesting what I was going to wear. Mm-hmm. Like, I think it's going to be this cold. And so I was like, are you going to wear Celsius jacket? You know, whatever, which is kind of our heavy jacket that we both kind of have. And you were like, no, I think I'm just going to go with the, what was it that you wore today?
I was going to do the heavy merino and
the vest.
And I thought I had a Fanatic, but I didn't even bring it. So.
Yeah. So anyway, you're like, yeah, I'm just going to do that. And so I didn't take your advice, and I'm glad that I didn't.
Yeah.
I don't have the vest, but like I took my Celsius jacket, which is my big jacket, which is not really like super fun to, haul around in the woods. But
Michelin Man style.
I'm glad I took it.
Yeah,
though.
it was chilly.
Yeah.
But, we saw a few deer. Actually, after we got down out of the stand, we made a little razoo to do some rattling and saw some does and a little bucky.
A rattling razoo,
Rattling razoo, that's it.
I like it, dude.
Yeah.
Well, today on the podcast, we have... this is kind of a bonus episode. It's one that we didn't really intend to do, and it's not on our normal schedule, but we're doing it because we feel like it is muy importante. And so this is a podcast, and it is with Brian Murphy of the QDMA. He's the CEO, but the important thing is it's not about CWD and what CWD is. You've heard that a million times probably by now, and you've heard it probably once or twice on this podcast. But what we wanted to do was address what how it affects us, CWD, in regards to like taking your trophy home.
Yeah, what actions we need to take as hunters, right? Because like the last thing that we want to do as people who care about this resource is impact this resource in a negative way and then impact like the future of hunters.
Yeah,
because that
exactly.
would be terrible.
Yeah, and same, and even more direct, like in your household with meat consumption and that kind of thing. Like, how does that work? What about testing? So some questions that Casey and I have actually been talking about, and we decided, you know what? If we have these questions, I'm sure there's a listener or two out there that has that same question. We should go ahead and get somebody on the podcast that can answer it. And luckily, at the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership Media Summit this year in Bozeman, Montana, we had the pleasure of really getting to know Brian Murphy. And great dude and tons of knowledge. So we're going to get to him in just a second, but real quick, remember, we have a giveaway going on. Casey, line out the details
We
for
are
us.
giving away an Exodus Trek trail camera, which we're fixing to go check a Trek right now, actually. And we're going to see what's on that one. But you can get your own if you go to iTunes right now and leave us a 5-star review. You do need to say something, but it can be real short, just like, hey guys, appreciate the podcast, or whatever, something like that real quick, 5 stars. And then by Halloween Day, we will have selected a winner, and one of these lucky people who gives us a review in that short period of time will win a Exodus Trek trail camera.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
I can't wait to give another one away. Which, by the way, the one that we gave away last time, what was that for? YouTube comments on Nameless, has not been claimed. So
running out of time.
Yeah, running out of time. I guess we're just gonna directly, since apparently this guy's not gonna watch our Facebook Live video that we did selecting him, we're going to go ahead and probably tag him on YouTube here pretty soon. And then if that doesn't happen, if he doesn't claim it within like a week after we tag him on YouTube, we're just going to be like, yo, dude, we're giving this away. So sorry.
That is our statute of limitation.
That's right. We're going to give it away again. So anyway, I mean, you might have a chance at another 2 Exodus Treks. So anyway, but for now, the iTunes review, don't forget. Now that we're stopped, let's get on the phone with Brian.
Sounds good.
On the phone now, we have Brian Murphy. He's the CEO of the Quality Deer Management Association. What's happening, Brian?
Oh, man, it's getting cooler here for a change. We're looking forward to some good deer hunting weather.
Yeah, and here would be in Georgia. You there right now?
That's right, yeah. Here in the great state of Georgia. The big storm just moved through overnight.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Y'all had some hurricane weather probably, huh?
We did, yeah.
How's that for you?
Well, it largely missed my part of Georgia, but what it did do is put a lot of food on the ground for the whitetail. So a lot of the oaks that were already dropping a few acorns, now there's going to be abundant food for the next week or so. So it's going to be a little tough hunting because there's going to be food everywhere, but that's all right. The rut's still several weeks away.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're kind of in the same position. We've had quite a bit of rain here in the late summer, early fall, and yeah, it's been tough, man. I mean, still lots of green stuff all around. It's hard to see and everything else. But have you had a chance to actually go out and chase them around a little bit?
Yeah, well, yes. I took my daughter on 2 occasions. I'm blessed to have 2 daughters that hunt, but my 18-year-old came home from college over the weekend, and thankfully she wanted to deer hunt with Dad. So we went out twice with the crossbow. It's still archery season here, and she managed to take a doe on both hunts.
Oh, nice.
So we got some venison in the freezer, and Dad's got some work to do in the next couple of days, cutting it all up.
Yeah, that's the good thing about being a young person is you just let your parents do everything for you.
Well, I used to have to drive her. Now I don't have to drive her, but I still have to do the gutting and skinning and processing. So and I'm happy to do it. I'm just happy to have 2 teenage girls that want to hunt.
Sure, that's right. Man. That's no lie right there. Well, so what do you, just kind of for the listener, explain what you do? What, as a CEO of QDMA, what do you do?
Yeah, for the last 21 years, I'm blessed to have been in this position a very long time. But for the last 21 years, I've been running the Quality Deer Management Association. And of course, for those that may not know us, we're a national nonprofit conservation organization dedicated to the future of whitetail deer and whitetail deer hunting. And we got members all over the U.S. and Canada and even a few around the world. And we primarily are the leading advocate for the whitetail deer, trying to create more educated and more successful deer hunters.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we had the pleasure of meeting you at the national convention here this summer and in Louisiana, and that was a pretty cool event, man. That was KC and myself. That was our first time, so pretty not a bad place to spend it since we tend to be kind of we like food, so there's a lot of good food down there in New Orleans.
Yeah, exactly. If you like to eat and like to learn about whitetails and meet some pretty cool deer hunters and land managers, we're a good place for that to all come together.
Sure, yeah, and so. Did they just since knowing that you were from Texas, did they just offer you that CEO position like no big deal? I mean, how did
well, it was back then. It was a staff of 1. I was the only staff member, so it was not. I had a big fancy title that meant I got to do everything from washing the floors and answering the phone. So I'm blessed to have a staff of about 40 now, and so we've grown and it's allowed us to make a lot more of an impact on our mission and on whitetails. So. Yeah, but it didn't hurt that I came from Texas. That's what got my foot in the door for graduate work at the University of Georgia, because that's where quality deer management and a lot of the pioneering science had come from on deer management was out of Texas. And so certainly having my roots there and my undergraduate training and work on a lot of the ranches in Texas, that allowed me to I think have an edge over some of the other incoming students in the East out here. So it did help me out.
Yeah, man. So I guess Casey and I were talking about this. We didn't, I don't know why we didn't. We may not have paid attention as good as we should have, but I don't know why we didn't realize you had been the CEO for 21 years now. What happened? Where's the Australian story in there? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I was blessed just immediately prior to taking the reins here. I was working at the time for the University of Georgia in a deer research capacity after grad school, and had an opportunity to go to all places in the world that no one has ever been, probably Tasmania. And so my wife and I jumped on a plane, took a job sight unseen, and flew down to Tasmania, which is the island state of Australia. And I was the deer manager down there for the Australian government. I was the first trained deer biologist in their country. They had a mess on their hands with overabundant fallow deer, and a lot of different user groups mad at each other about what should and shouldn't be done with them. And so they threw me in the middle of it and said sink or swim, and thankfully it worked out. Thankfully it worked out pretty good, and we had a wonderful time.
That's cool. You called a lot of spiders while you were down there too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, man. We they got all kinds of things that slither and crawl, and some nasty spiders and snakes, and all Tasmanian devils. So it's an interesting place for sure. And if somebody likes to hunt and shoot a lot, that's a place to go. Australia in general. I mean, my first rabbit hunt, me and a buddy got 99 rabbits, and took my daughters over a couple of years ago, and they filled a pickup truck full of wallabies one night. So
golly,
there's a lot of things to do and see over there that are very different than this part of the world.
On the main island, is the big fence still functioning?
The dingo fence, I don't know if it is or not. I'm sure it's like all fences. Know, they have holes in them and things fall on them and animals get out. But they still try to maintain it. As far as last time I was over there, they were still talking about trying to maintain it. So it must have some degree of keeping dingoes out of one part of their country and not the other.
Yeah, that's crazy. So a lot of this, backstory that we have with you is we actually were privileged to meet up with you at the TRCP Media Summit this summer and get to hang out and actually kind of get to know each other and talk about stuff and really listen to all your cool stories, because we don't have near as many as you do. So, but one of the big reasons why we were all there this summer was, the main topic of the whole event was CWD, right? And we had a couple panels that we got to listen to and interact with that were real helpful. And of course, it's been kind of at the front of our minds for, a couple years now, especially since it's kind of gotten to Texas, and really probably thanks to some of the work that QDMA has done is to publicize and make it known that CWD is an issue, because, to be quite frank, until 2 or 3 years ago, I didn't really understand that it was a thing, so, and ever since that has kind of happened. And then we went to the TRCP Summit, following up from the QDMA Summit or the National Convention where we talked about it. We've really been kind of struggling with a few things and a couple questions, and I think that our viewers or our listeners probably have some similar questions. So we kind of wanted to get you on the phone today to run through some stuff about CWD, not so much about what the disease is, but more about the human side of it. What can we do to mitigate the issues that at least that we are in our control, and then, how safe is it when it comes, we all like to hunt to eat, right? It's a part of it. It's part of the experience. So I guess first off, aside from the eating, honestly, I love to hang antlers on my wall. They're beautiful. They're great. They're great for stories. I love the tradition of it and everything. But seeing that CWD is concentrated in spinal columns and in the brain a lot of times, it really kind of puts a damper on trying to bring a head back with you, say if you travel out of state or something, or even if you go from county to county. How should you approach that scenario?
Right. Well, that's a great question. And an increasing number of hunters now are traveling to hunt, going on multiple states or multiple areas in a given year. So it's going to be an increasingly necessary understanding of CWD and their responsibility of how to handle that. First of all, let's talk about kind of the two primary ways that CWD is spreading. One is human-assisted movement of live deer and elk, whether that be by the deer farming industry or even by state agencies. Both of those groups are still moving some live deer and elk around, and because we don't have a very good, reliable live animal test, we don't always know and can't know that whether those animals that are getting moved may or may not have CWD. So that's one thing that's largely out of the hunter's control. The one thing that's in the hunter's control is not moving high-risk deer parts. And you mentioned those being the brain matter, the spinal column, the bones of the animal from an area that has CWD to one that doesn't, because conceivably you're moving that infectious material to an area, perhaps your back 40 where you dumped the carcass, and lo and behold, you may have an outbreak where you live, and you brought that with you from Colorado or Montana, wherever you came from. So that speaks to the need to process the animals the correct way before leaving a state or area with CWD. And what's more important there is that a growing number of states, even many that don't have CWD, are closing their borders to deer from any state that isn't boned out or the skull caps cleaned. So Alabama just did this recently, just as an example. So I could literally hunt in Georgia, where it does not have CWD, and drive into Alabama with a whole deer, another state without CWD, and I'd be breaking their regulation now. Mm-hmm. So you can't bring in any deer parts that aren't properly processed. So what does that mean to the hunter? First thing is be knowledgeable about where you're hunting, and if that state or any state you're driving through or back from has regulations. But the easiest thing is not even to worry about that. Just process the meat yourself, and that means just debone it, take all the bones out of the meat. And if you do have a buck that you want to retain the trophy quality, you'll have to learn how to cape it out. In other words, if the full cape, not just cut it off the neck, but I mean the full cape off the head, and cut the skull cap out, and then make sure that skull cap is free of any brain matter. And if you can't do that, don't know how to do that, either A, learn, or B, plan ahead. Look for taxidermists in the area. Many taxidermists will do the cape job for you, even if they're not going to do the finished work. So just plan for that. Build in time to bone your meat, to take your deer to the processor or the taxidermist and let them do the caping.
Can I ask you a question right there? When you talk about cleaning the skull cap, is it just actual brain matter? It's not like the inside lining of the skull or anything like that. Just as long as all the brain is gone, you're good. Yeah, just get all the brain matter out and wash it out really good, and let it dry. And that usually would adhere to the regulations in just about any state out there. And it's extra work for the hunters, no question. But would you rather do that extra work or potentially be bringing the disease back to where you live? Oh, the first answer. The first answer 100 times.
Yeah, so and you know what? Frankly, I learned how to do a full cape years ago, and I find it quite rewarding to be able to do that on my own animals. And sometimes if you're in the field for several days and it's warm, you need to do that just to preserve your cape. And I enjoy that part of the process. Bring you a little handy saw or a sawzall to cut the skull cap off. It's not a big deal. Deboning an animal is not hard. And, what I tell people after they debone it, heck, you're 80% of the way to doing all the processing yourself. So buy yourself a little cheap grinder and sausage stuffer and have fun.
Yeah.
Learn how to turn that into something you're really proud of. And, and I find the more of that process that I control, I know what's going into it. That's one thing now with CWD that's a concern to me, is that, it's certainly possible, if not likely, that a lot of processors around the country have run CWD positive animals through their facility. And frankly, that infectious material, we have almost no way of truly, sanitizing that environment. So it's certainly possible that even if your deer is CWD free, there's a chance that some of those prions could get into your meat that you get back from the processor. Because we all know that sometimes the processors do things in batches, and you don't know what part of that batch is yours,
right?
And what somebody else's. So again, another reason to be what I call a home gamer and just do the processing yourself.
Yeah. So is there an article or some sort of media that the QDMA provides to show you how to cape out a deer or how to bone it out?
I don't think we have got that on our website, but certainly there are a million YouTube videos out there of how to do that. And in fact, I did a deer processing night the other night for some of our Field to Fork students. We run an adult onset hunter course, and these are people that we recruit out of the local community. And the ages ranged in this class from 17 to 70.
Oh, wow.
wanted to be a first-time hunter at 70. No one had ever asked him. He always wanted to.
Wow.
Never had a way to do it, So there are people all around us that work with you and around you in your social circles that are adults that are maybe a little embarrassed or intimidated to take up hunting as an adult. But the beauty about that is they can start hunting and buy a license the next day, whereas kids, we all love kids. But, if you take a 12-year-old, he or she's 4, 5, 6 years away from having any money and a car and the ability to control their own lives. And, the success is really with the adults right now. So we really got to focus there. But anyway, I was doing that processing for them. And I was amazed at how intent they were on this demonstration because food is a big driving factor.
Sure.
And, we did a full deboning process where I showed them all the different cuts and what they were best for. And then we actually turned some of it into bratwurst right there on the spot and then cooked it. And it was a phenomenal. I mean, they just ate it like, they were ravenous carnivores. I mean, it was great. It's just that whole process to me is enjoyable. So I encourage people to get involved in the whole totality of it, the full circle from the hunt to the table.
Sure. Yeah. So, so this brings up a question, whether I guess you could this could be done in the boning out process, or if you were, say you had your skull cap and you take it off of there and there's brain matter on it, you take your knife and you kind of get the brain matter off of this thing. Is that knife, do you throw that knife away? I mean,
well, there's probably at some microscopic level of, a prion or 2 or 3 or 5,000. I don't know how many of these little things it takes to be infectious. I don't know that I'd throw my knife away, but, because the chances of those prions getting into the environment in enough quantity that a deer uptakes them is probably pretty microscopic. But here's kind of the guidance we give hunters, and my personal opinion I'll share as well. And right now there is no evidence that CWD infected animals causes the human form of the disease, which is called variant Crutchfield-Jakob disease. It's a spontaneous brain disease in about 1% of Americans. There's no evidence that eating infected deer causes that in humans. And CDC and other groups have been looking for trends for literally decades. So if it was a huge trend out there, we would have caught it, or they would have caught it. So if it is occurring, it's occurring at an extremely low prevalence rate in humans, if it is, and that's the big if. Researchers have shown experimentally through what they call transgenic mice with human genes inserted into them, that is at least remotely, or it is possible that humans could contract the disease. A small group of these mice contracted the human form. And a more recent study out of Canada with macaque monkeys showed a similar result, that a portion of those macaque monkeys did contract the human form of the disease when being both fed and inoculated with infectious material. Now, the jury's still out. We've known about similar diseases, one called scrapie in sheep for a couple hundred years, and it's almost identical to chronic wasting disease, and there's never been a known human fatality. But then we have another close cousin called BSE, or mad cow disease, and that killed 177 Europeans about 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that's 177 out of literally probably 10 million people who consumed infected beef. So, probably that many people literally died on the way to or from the grocery store to buy their beef in vehicles, in car crashes and heart attacks and things.
Yeah, sure.
So again, it's if it's occurring at a low rate. My personal opinion is, if I knew it were CWD positive, I would not eat it. And that's the general guidance from most people in the know around the nation. Just on the safe side, if you know for a fact, if you hunt an area with CWD, there's likely some way through a state agency generally to have your animal tested, generally for nothing, sometimes for a nominal cost. If it is a nominal cost, I would pay it just because I want to know. And then you can take that stuff back home, processed in your freezer. If, in fact, you get the results back a couple of weeks later and it says it's positive, then I would contact my state wildlife agency and ask for their preferred disposal method. Many modern landfills are a good option because they have certain sealants and various ways to contain leaching of all kinds of things. Some states have gone as far as buy incinerators. would not go out and just dump it in the woods, because again, that's almost the same as taking an infected animal from one place to the other. So,
sure.
Very, very deep, maybe. I don't know.
So, at the TRCP event, we heard from a few researchers, biologists that are kind of on the leading edge of CWD in a panel situation. And forgive me for not remembering their names, but they kind of had like some scary thoughts about the possibilities of it jumping to humans in regards to they talked about, I think with the macaques, some of the studies had shown symptoms similar to diabetes and some of these like chronic diseases that humans have. And so there was a statement that was something along the lines of this could possibly be what we're seeing in humans, and the fact that it plays out in such a, this can be such a long process that a human would actually develop symptoms. It could be 50 years or whatever. I mean, what's the?
There's two things that cause great concern for researchers on this disease. One is the fact that it takes so long to manifest, both in deer and in humans. In deer, and that's one thing, I hear hunters sometimes, make the remark of, that deer, no way that deer had chronic wasting disease, fat as mud and healthy as a horse kind of thing. Yeah. And you can't tell by looking at one. It takes generally years for an animal to look symptomatic. In other words, look sick and weak and emaciated. And the other thing is the prion diseases as a group are known to mutate. So we know now that we have different strains, if you will, of CWD. One CWD prion is not the same as another necessarily. When they misshape and fold back on themselves, causing the abnormal form of this protein, sometimes they don't fold back exactly the same way. And so there are different strains of CWD, and there are probably different levels of susceptibility among humans to CWD. We know, for example, that about 5% of whitetails have a particular genotype or set of genes that makes them much more resistant to the disease. It's in very low prevalence, 5% or less of whitetails, which means it probably isn't a good genotype. In other words, nature has selected against this genotype for whatever reason for thousands, if not millions of years. But for whatever reason, this one, is more resistant to the disease. It is not immune. 100% of these animals still get the disease. 100% will die at some point, if not killed by a hunter or some other factor, to the disease. And they live longer, meaning they shed more of the virus material if they're infected. So it's not necessarily a good thing. It may give us hope that we can find a particular subspecies or type of whitetails out there, because there are a lot of different ones across North America, that is completely resistant. We haven't found that animal yet. We don't know if it exists. We don't know if it can be bred into them over generations through selective breeding. We don't know those answers. But that's certainly one possible route of beating this disease long term, is to find a type of whitetail that's completely immune to the disease and repopulate areas that over time get depopulated by the ones that aren't immune, and just rebuild our herds that way. But that's a little pie in the sky stuff right now that we don't know about.
Yeah. So say you shot a deer or an elk from a high CWD area last year, and you still have some big roasts in your freezer, and you're kind of worried about it. Is there a way to test that deer at this point?
There's not a way to test the meat, not a practical way. I mean, the researchers can there's some high-level tests that could probably detect it, but what they're going to pull is a very specific part of the brain and lymph system at a check station somewhere, which is the gold standard pieces of your deer. So once that head and neck is removed, the researchers aren't going to be able to test your deer for you.
Gotcha.
So if a hunter's listening that shot a deer, that first thing I do is go on the Onyx app and see if the county in which you killed that animal is known to be CWD positive. QDMA partnered with Onyx, and we got a layer across their app, their map rather, that shows you. So first go in there and see if that county's red with CWD. If it is, then you just have to, and then you didn't get it tested for whatever reason, then you just have to make a fundamental decision. It's probably a low risk thing, because even in a a herd that's had CWD a long time, generally speaking, prevalence rates are, 1 to 5, 6, 7%. I mean, there are certainly examples in Wisconsin that are 30%. But most are in that low, single digit range. So you'd have a less than 5% chance of having that animal with CWD. That said, you started off a conversation with, I love antlers. Well, I do too. And I like bigger antlers because I like to hunt mature animals. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, mature deer and elk, particularly deer, have 3 to 4 times higher prevalence rates than does. They have larger home ranges. They are more social animals with licking and grooming and various things they do. So they are more likely to contract the disease. So if you shot an adult whitetail, an adult mule deer, an adult elk in a CWD area, whatever the overall prevalence rate is, the males are several times higher than that. So you'd have to double or triple that to get a ballpark estimate of what your chances might be.
Gotcha. So how do you? I mean, it's the testing. I've done some research recently on, how to test your animals in a couple different states, and it's actually pretty hard to find how to get that done. It's not a very top result on Google searches.
Yeah, there needs to be some coordination. That's one of our biggest concerns as an organization is if the states can't make it easy enough, a lot of people are going to say the heck with it and just take their chances. And therefore our risk of spreading it just keeps going up and up and up. Mm-hmm. Problem is these things cost a lot of money. The labs, the check stations, the sample collection. I mean, states are now spending millions of dollars that once went to wildlife management areas or buying new public land or helping private landowners. I mean, whatever all the good things that state agencies have spent their dollars on in the past now are getting diverted to CWD. It's just an absolute atrocity of how many dollars, our dollars, that used to be providing great hunter and landowner services are now, going into chronic wasting disease, and we've got to figure this thing out. I mean, there's no doubt about it, and we're active, working behind the scenes. We've got 3. We helped with 3 bills that have as much as $25 million associated with them that are in Congress right now. We're trying to push through the circles of D.C. We've got another one that would pay for a National Academies of Science review of the National Herd Certification Program. That's for the captive deer industry. Our belief is there's a lot of loopholes in that that are increasing risk. There's now been 100, right at 100, last time I checked, 90-something captive facilities in this country that have tested positive for CWD. It's not what they want. I'm not putting the blame on them as much as it's just that the activities they do have risk. And when they move and buy and sell and trade deer, there's a higher level of risk. And there's just certain things that we believe as an organization need to be done to tighten that industry down a little bit, just to further reduce the risk. And we're working hard to try to get some of those positive changes.
Yeah, we can appreciate that here in Texas. For sure.
No kidding. Do you think that, say you take a state like Texas where you have a cervid like elk that are free ranging in some areas, and then in a lot of captive cervid pens that aren't considered a game animal, is that problematic in the spread of CWD, since you have such a large animal that is very social that doesn't have any regulation?
Yeah, where that challenge comes in is the nexus between the fact that they're in a pen or not in a pen in and of itself doesn't increase the risk of CWD. Mm-hmm. What really does get down to, though, is who has jurisdiction. And Texas is a good case because it's a situation where you have 2 agencies that share jurisdiction over captive deer. And you have Texas Parks and Wildlife and you have Texas Animal Health Commission. And Texas is actually a good situation where those 2 agencies work together pretty well and have a high degree of concern over CWD. Other states, however, some states, many states, in fact, the state's ag agency is the one that has jurisdiction over the captive deer, and sometimes that becomes a little bit of a train wreck. And because they have less concern over impacts on wild deer, their job is to help landowners diversify their income, whether that be captive deer in this case, or alpacas, or emus, or any number of other activities. So our position as an organization is that the state wildlife agency should have the primary jurisdiction because, their mission is to protect wild deer. So they're much more aggressive typically on depopulating herds captive herds that become infected with CWD, much generally more stringent on requirements and making sure they comply with all the applicable rules and regulations. So, we certainly would recommend state agencies having that control rather than ag agencies. But about half the states have shared jurisdiction out there.
Yeah, I got you. Well, Brian, man, it's been great getting to pick your brain on some of this stuff because I feel like a lot of times the general sportsman's concern is a little bit like not front of mind, which for good reason, right? Like we're concerned about the deer, but we want to do our best to help, and to just not really help, but just do the least amount of damage as possible. It'd be terrible to you be the one who brought an animal back and now your county has it. Like it just.
Yeah, well, I kind of think of chronic wasting disease is similar to someone wanting to put a nuclear facility next to my property or a big garbage dump. It's that old NIMBY acronym, not in my backyard.
Yeah, exactly.
And we ought to all think about that because I for one don't believe that chronic wasting disease has to infect every county and every deer herd in the country. Yes, it's in 25 states, but if you drill down deeper, it's only in about 240 counties in the whole U.S. And that's about 8% of all available counties. So 92% of hunters hunt in areas that don't have it. So the key is, if you don't, do everything you can to prevent it from coming in. And the first thing you can do is be responsible yourself, get knowledgeable about it, and just don't bring infected parts back to your neck of the woods. Second thing is to be outspoken in your local hunting circles and kind of check up your friends. It's kind of like the old days when poaching was more common. Most of that change through societal behavior changes. Mm-hmm. The same with drinking and driving, wearing seatbelts. There's a lot of these things you can point to that, attitudes and paradigms can shift. And so we just have to do that. And we have to pass that on to the next generation so that each successive generation of hunters becomes more vigilant and responsible. Because if not, we're going to, we have a chance to lose this game.
Yeah.
And,
no kidding. So join your local QMA branch, and you can help shame somebody into not spreading CWD.
There you go. But first thing is just get knowledgeable about it. The average hunter out there can't clearly define how CWD is different than EHD.
Yes,
there's
just
letters
an acronym,
and,
right? It's
just jargon. And EHD kills a lot of deer, but it's very different than CWD. Mm-hmm. And so, that's not one we can do much about. CWD is one we can do something about. Yeah. And the biggest thing is not moving live deer or parts. But, once CWD hits an area, hunters often lose things they cherish, like feeding and baiting and minerals and deer urine and natural deer urine and so forth. So, those things, are culturally Texas is a great example. I mean, you try to take feeding away from Texans, and boy, you can start a range war.
Oh yeah.
A less controversial subject would be the use of natural deer urine, but a lot of people do use natural deer urine in hunting, and there is some degree of risk in natural deer urine. Mm-hmm. We think it's very low. But, if you're so concerned about CWD, that would be one area. One thing you could do is go to a synthetic deer urine product, which more and more manufacturers are making. That would be kind of recommendation number one. And if you say, well, I'm not ready to go to synthetics, the next best option would be to check the back of the bottle. And if it's got a big check mark from the Archery Trade Association, then that means that urine producer is participating in a voluntary program that the deer urine industry voluntarily adopted on themselves, which requires more stringent regulation within their own production facilities than is required by ag. So, they took a voluntary measure to try to safeguard their ship, which I commend them for.
Yeah, that's cool. That's good knowledge too. I didn't know that was a thing. So that's awesome. So, it's a good way for us to hang on the stuff we cherish. And I know we kind of started this with questions about trophies, and the big thing for us, of course, is the meat. But we all like the beautiful antlers. So is CWD going to kind of just end the Euro mount? I mean, is there any way to make that still be something that you do and that you a way to preserve your trophy, or is it just not going to be an option?
Oh no, there are techniques that don't require cutting through the skull or the skull cap off. You can have the whole white bleached skull, which I love a good European amount as much as anybody. Mm-hmm. But no, there's some taxidermists that have techniques that can blow that out with pressure washers and various other things that can save that. So no, I don't see the end of that. But what I do see is because older males are more likely to be infected, more and more states are removing antler restrictions on deer and elk because they don't want their populations to have a lot of older age males in them. So that means that over time there's going to be fewer trophies because fewer older bucks or bulls in the herd. So that's a big conundrum, and in many areas, landowners and hunters are being encouraged to shoot the daylights out of the young bucks again, and that's very contrary to where our nation of hunters has gone over the last 30 years towards quality deer management and producing these older bucks. They're more fun to hunt. I don't know where that's going to end, but there's definitely a collision course coming.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking when you were mentioning that, what's the is that just kind of a Band-Aid that we keep on forever, or when do we just do that until we find a cure, or how do we?
Yeah.
Is there ever an end to just shooting every buck like we used to do prior to QDMA?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that, and it's a scary thought because we don't know what that looks like. Now, what our position is a little different, and you'd probably imagine so, being the organization that kind of is behind the quality deer management movement. But we contend that having at least some deer up to 3 years of bucks up to 3 years of age in a herd is an acceptable trade-off if hunters stay engaged, they stay working with their state wildlife agency in testing, and they harvest enough antlerless deer because the stuff spreads in the females too. Mm-hmm. And particularly older does are more likely to have it than young does, just as bucks. So, keeping the hammer on the does is a good way, we think, an offset, because if hunters just say, it's just not worth it anymore, I'm not going to hunt if I can't hunt at least a 3-year-old buck, then they don't hunt, and then they don't buy a license, they don't control antlerless deer. They're not a part of the solution, they're part of the problem. Mm-hmm. So we think there's a trade-off there. At least we want to test that hypothesis that, allowing some bucks to reach at least middle age is worth it in CWD management if hunters will do the right thing on testing and doe harvest.
Right, cool.
And keep it engaged.
Yeah. So, Are we on the brink of a live test? Does that seem like something that's plausible in the next decade or so?
Yes, there are a couple out there that are being used. They're not approved yet, but the deer farming industry is using a rectal and a tonsil test that are pretty good. They're not where we need them to be, but and that'll help only on testing the live animals, and that's a very small part of it. I mean, it's an important part of it. We need a much more rapid, effective hunter test on harvested animals. Yeah, I mean, that would do us more value right now for the hunter. But certainly the deer industry needs a live test, and so do some states that are still moving deer and elk. And what we recommend right now is a complete moratorium across the board of all live deer and elk until we get a better handle on it. Now, that recommendation has gone to, very high up folks within USDA and others, and it's fallen on deaf ears, frankly.
Yeah.
But that's what we contend is necessary, and would be the best first step. But that's unlikely to happen. There's just too much politics involved with moving deer and elk. I mean, it's a lot of people tied up in a lot of places behind those industries.
Lots of money behind it all too. So,
it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Well, Brian, man, wealth of knowledge as we really came to figure out at TRCP Summit through our good talks, man. So I appreciate you hopping on the phone with us again, and good luck this fall, man.
Same to you. Always a pleasure.
Yes, sir.
Anything we can do on this end, glad to help.
All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Man, lots of good info. It's hard to keep up with Brian sometimes.
Oh, goodness. That kind of has been a lot of places, done a lot of cool things, and is willing to share that with you in such a well-articulated way, right? Like he knows all this stuff. That's what's cool.
Yeah, I'm glad he's on our side, man.
No kidding.
Like you look at somebody that's smart as a whip like him, and you just got to be glad that they're on your side about pretty much everything. And
that's right.
And I'm hoping that maybe we can get him back on the podcast, talk other things that are a little less depressing. But I'm glad that he was able to provide us info because, like I said, we had these questions going in this year since we're going to be traveling out of state some in the next couple of years, and. Mm-hmm. You have traveled out of state so far this year, and so just thinking about all that, man, it's important to know that stuff, and even out of county, that kind of thing, like we talked about earlier, it could be potentially spreading. So
that's right, guys. It's just something that we have to be aware of now, but it's nothing to be depressed about. We're still going to hunt. We're still going to love it, but we need to do our best to preserve this resource.
That's right, man. That's a good way to wrap up this episode,
right.
I think.
Let's do it.
Let's go check a trek.
All right.
All right, man. Remember, this is your element.
Living it.
Hey guys, turkey season is in full swing right now, and if you are planning on getting after it, make sure to pick up some meat eater Phelps turkey calls to stuff into the old turkey vest or into your fanny pack right now. I carry a few different things. I like to use mouth calls, and I like to use pot calls. Mouth calls or diaphragms, I like them because it gives you hand-free calling, meaning when you're working a bird up close, you can have your gun on your knee, finger on the trigger, ready to roll, and still be making turkey sounds. I like pot calls. I just like pot calls. I enjoy calling with a pot call. Whatever direction you go, including a box call, which I don't personally use too much, but they're fun and great, and I started out with them. Yanni, on the other hand, one of my main turkey hunting buddies, he loves box calls. And what's funny is I'll now and then look to him and give him the look that means get out your box call and find us a turkey. So it's not that I don't like them. I just have Yanni use his. Then I don't have to carry it. Go to Phelps Game Calls. Get calls that are made in the USA and get calls that'll get them close. Find yours at phelpsgamecalls.com today.